When you hear the name Tree Top Pirus, you're not just hearing the name. You're tapping into a history woven deep into the streets of Compton. It's a name that echoes from the cracked sidewalks of Rosecrans to the furthest corners of hip-hop lyrics, police reports, and neighborhood legends. Tree Top Pirus, a branch of the larger Piru Alliance, emerged in the 1970s, born from the concrete roots of a city under pressure. Gangs in Compton and beyond weren't just born from rebellion. They were born from survival, from a need to belong, to protect, and to push back. And the Tree Top Pirus are a strong representation of this. Named after tree-named streets in East Compton, like Hickory, Spruce, and Maple, Tree Top Pirus, they didn't just claim turf. They claimed an identity, one that would be respected, feared, and immortalized in both the streets and in rap culture. From the music of legends like DJ Quick and YG, to whispers in the penitentiary, the Tree Top Pirus' influence spread beyond the city limits. But with that same recognition came numerous rivalries, and a cycle of retaliation that painted the city red. And behind those headlines is a deeper story. One of young lives navigating poverty, systematic neglect, and the lure of loyalty in a world where trust is currency. What makes a young man or woman pledge allegiance to a color, a name, or a neighborhood? To the outside world, it's violence. But to them, it's family, it's protection. It's the only thing that made sense when nothing else did. That's why this is more than just a gang story. This is human history. This is the Tree Top Pirus, and they definitely have a story to tell. Yeah. All right, welcome to Cali's Most Dangerous. Let's get into it.
On Rosecrans Path, only in the right, tree toppers to the left, fruit toppers on the right.
P-Funk is just as real as that, that other thing I did, from this side. We doing it like this, and it ain't no different.
Piru with 10 square miles. It ain't but two sets in Compton, Pirus and Crips. We don't have no Bloods in Compton, California.
Right.
There only be hate for my captors and hope of revenge in a spiritual life. I bear no resemblance to any fighter you've ever seen. I've been built like stone from within, my courage is of a lion. I possess the speed of a cheetah. And in the darkest shadows of the night, I'll shine like armor when the morning dawn casts its light.
I'm looking, like I said, just to pull up, holler at my kin folks within the neighborhood I grew up in, not thinking like anything negative gonna happen.
Yeah, this your soil.
Yeah, and I was wrong.
Right.
A man and a woman have been arrested and charged in the slaying of rapper Vincent Coran, known by the stage name Slim 400. Michael Terry charged with murder and being a felon in possession of a firearm.
On April 22nd of 2006, Tree Top Pirus member Data was chased down, shot, and wounded in Compton, California. And at that time, members of the Tree Top Pirus believed an Hispanic gang known as the Segundos was responsible for the shooting. So they plotted a mission for revenge against this gang. That evening, Tree Top Pirus member William Davis asked fellow gang member Deshaun Leslie to drive him around so he could look out and see if any members was outside. He was looking for Segundos to confront or go on a mission against, and Leslie agreed. So with Davis armed with the pistol, they drove down Line Avenue in Compton, an area claimed in the Segundos territory, as a second vehicle, driven by another Tree Top member, followed behind. Meanwhile, Ivan Nieves, who was a Latino, was seated in his Mustang on Line Avenue, wearing a blue Dodgers cap, which is a known color of the Segundos gang. But he was not a member of any gang. And while seated, Leslie spots Ivan in his car and turns it around back towards the Mustang. And once close enough, he parks his car in front of Ivan's car, so Davis could bang on and ask him where he was from, or challenge Ivan, asking him his gang affiliation. But Davis, he had other plans. Davis exits the car, walks over to Ivan, and believing he was a Segundo gang member, fired numerous rounds at him, hitting him several times. Well, 8 shots turned out to be fatal for Ivan. Davis then gets back in the car, and the two cars speed away from the scene. But due to witnesses and a thorough investigation from the detectives, the Tree Top Pirus members were eventually found, and ultimately the members were sentenced to life in prison. This situation played out in 2006, and as sad as it may be, it was only one of many daily stories that have an attachment to the Tree Top Pirus, especially when it came to that year. This Piru gang, while smaller than some of the others, is known around Compton as being one of the most treacherous and deadly gangs around that area. They're known to engage in several deadly wars with several Crip gangs, Serenios, and even a couple different Pirus. But to fully understand why they have this long list of enemies and why they're so hated, it's essential that we get into the history of the Tree Top Pirus. History of the Tree Top Pirus.
Tree Tops got started in 1958, 59. One of my relatives and some more brothers.
All right, when it comes to all the Piru gangs in Compton, if you watch my other videos, you know their creation can be traced back to the 1960s, originally known as the Piru Street Boys in its earliest days. And in 1969, the Pirus joined forces with the Brim Gang, a gang that fell victim to multiple Crip attacks at the time. And by the early 1970s, together in the LA County Jail, they formed an alliance today known as the Blood. The Blood and Piru Alliance is still holds strong today with some sets. And the Tree Top Pirus ties are deeply connected with the original Pirus from the foundation to today. But the foundation of the Tree Top Pirus, it plays out a little differently compared to the rest of the Pirus in Compton. That's because before the Piru umbrella was established, these guys were already a tight-knit group that was often seen having each other's back. In the 1950s, there were racist groups in Compton like the Spook Hunters and the Minutemen, whose main goal was to terrorize the local minorities, often picking on them, throwing eggs and rotten fruit on the young group, and often resorting to violence to establish dominance over them.
We're coming across the street, and these Peckerwoods drove up on the side of us and asked us, do we know where? So they told me, man, don't walk in the cars. I walked up on these white boys' cars, being innocent and black, thinking all white folks like you. And it's something that my mother them instilled in me. White people are your friends and this and that. So I walked up on the car. When I walked on the car, they threw eggs and tomatoes on me.
So early on, OG Marv, who was a prominent member from the Tree Top Pirus, and a couple of his friends started a small group called the Blackjack. And after a couple of run-ins with these racist groups, these smaller groups in the surrounding areas started to come together, calling themselves the Tree Tops. Being formed shortly after other Piru gangs like Luther's Park, their name comes from the numerous streets their territory falls under, including Acacia Street, Poplar Street, and Maple Street.
Neighborhood was called Tree Tops.
Tree Top, yeah.
Because all our streets, I'm from Elm Street. We ran Freddy Cougar out of there. So all the streets were named after trees. Fruit Town is cherry, fig, plum, so they became a Fruit Town. The swamps in Compton, because it was a swamp over in their neighborhood, so they was the swamp area. Then they had Spook Town because the train tracks came through 12 o'clock at night and they go woo, and they thought it was spooks. Then they had what Nutty Block was, they were called Boot Hill because they got the two graveyards in their neighborhood.
And those are all names of gangs before Bloods and Crips.
That was before.
And from their foundation, the Tree Top Pirus, they made a reputation for themselves, mostly being violent and very money motivated. But to get into all that and way more, we have to get into who this gang is today. Who are the Tree Top Pirus? The Tree Top Pirus, also known as the Tree Top Pirus and the West Side Trees, are primarily an African-American street gang located on the west side of Compton, California. When it comes to attire, the most notable cap for the Tree Top Pirus and most gangs that fall under this umbrella is the iconic Philadelphia Phillies hat. In terms of area, the Tree Top Pirus neighborhood is located in the northern region of Compton, south of Rosecrans Avenue, between Arambe Avenue and Acacia Avenue. In this gang, they consist of several cliques, with some of the most notable being the 300 block and the 400 block, which are east of Arambe, and other cliques consist of 500 block and the 600 block, which is west of Arambe. It's also the 800 block and the 900 block, which is represented by North Hickory Street.
P-Folk is just as real as that, that other thing I did, from this side. We doing it like this, and it ain't no different. We all black, just for some stupid reason, people choose to make it territorial.
And like already mentioned, the Tree Top Pirus' roots can be traced back to the 1950s. But by the 1980s, these cliques built a reputation for violence and continued to grow. So by the 1990s, they're one of the biggest gangs numbers-wise. Particularly in 1999, after the Tree Top Pirus expanded across the United States, especially in states like Maryland. To be exact, this subset of the Tree Top Pirus were started in Washington County Detention Center in Hagerstown, Maryland. And from their foundations, they made headlines in that state, which was especially a case in the early 2000s when a high-ranking female member named Michelle Hellburn, also known as Michelle Hell, was implicated for a murder and major drug trafficking operation. Yeah, that happened in Maryland. But trust, when you come back to Compton, this gang's activity was on a whole nother level from their foundation up until today. Matter of fact, like I already mentioned, 2006 was an intense year for the Tree Top Pirus, with another deadly situation planned in early 2006. And while this occurred in California, it was still way outside the gang's territory. On January 6 of 2006, at around 11:15 a.m., LaTeresa Baylor and her 13-year-old son and a 19-year-old family friend, Terry Warren, went to the legal aid office located on 8th and Union Avenue in Los Angeles, California. While Baylor stood on the sidewalk smoking a cigarette, Cardero and Warren crossed the street and went into a thrift store. After Cardero and Warren left the thrift store, they waited to cross the street as Baylor went inside the legal aid office. As Cardero and Warren crossed the street, Jamal Dumas and the girl crosses from the other side. And as they crossed each other, Jamal bumped his shoulder into Warren's shoulder. So Warren asked him, "You ain't gonna say excuse me?" To which Jamil responded, "You know where you at? It's my territory." Warren then said he didn't care whose territory it was and he was just gonna go buy pants. Jamal then asked Warren where he was from, and Warren answered that he was from MCS, meaning Mid City Stoner. Jamal then pushed Warren, so Warren took off his necklace and handed it to Cardero, as he asked Jamal if he was going to fight. So Jamal responded, "Yeah, we about to fight." At this point, Jamal and Warren were in each other's faces, and in the midst of that, Jamal told the girl with him to give him a jacket. And after about another minute of argument between Jamal and Warren, Jamal pulled out a handgun from the jacket pocket. Warren then told Cardero to go get his mom, and Cardero began backing up. And while backing up, Jamal extended his arm and without saying anything, fired one shot. Jamal and Cardero then make eye contact with each other. Then Jamal and the girl run away from the scene. Cardero, he then runs to the legal aid office, yelling for his mother. Baylor came outside and found Warren on the ground, trembling and grasping for breath. Shortly after that, sadly, he passed away. Meanwhile, a civilian was cleaning the sidewalk in the front of the store on Union Street when he observed three young men standing together. He recognized one of them as Jamal, who he had seen around the neighborhood and inside his store. He said he saw Jamal remove an object from his pocket or waistband, pointing at one of the two, followed by the sound of the gunshot. Then he saw one of the other two men fall to the ground. He said the other person ran across the street to the legal aid office, then returned with the woman. Last, he said he didn't hear any arguing or see the young man who was shot move before Jamal fired the gun. That evening, at around 5:30 p.m., Los Angeles detectives were conducting surveillance at East 71st Street. And at about 7 p.m., a detective saw Jamal crouching behind a car in a driveway. Jamal then jumped up and ran across the street. But another officer followed and placed him under arrest. And after he was arrested and booked, during an interview, he told the detectives that the gun he used was at a friend's house. He wouldn't get the officers his friend's address, but said he would call his friend and have his friend put the gun outside where the police could find it. The thing is, Jamal didn't mind telling the officers where he put the gun because he thought that they thought he was innocent. Claiming on that night, Jamal, who was then 15 years old, slept in a stairwell in an apartment building near 7th Avenue and Valencia Street. He had a small handgun he kept for protection against gang members who had been trying to give him problems. And on that morning, he met with his friend Wiley, who had been staying nearby. Claiming later on that day, as Jamal and Wiley were walking down Union Avenue, he saw Warren and Cardero crossing down the street walking towards him. And after that, Jamal and Warren began man-dogging each other. So they never bumped into each other in the first place. He says Warren then asked Jamal, "What's up, cuz? You know me from somewhere?" So Jamal responded, "Where would I know you from?" Followed by Warren asking, "Where you from?" And Jamal responding, he was from Tree Top Pirus. Saying Warren then told him, "Cuz I'm Watts," insinuating they belonged to a Crip gang in the Watts area. Saying he told him all this as he was walking close to him. But once he got too close, Jamal pushed him away. Followed by Warren saying they were about to fight and Warren removing his shirt and chain. Jamal said he was afraid he would get beat up by Warren and Cardero, mentioning that he looked at Wiley, who had him in her jacket, and wished he had hidden his gun. But Jamal said he then took out the gun and pointed it at Warren in order to get Warren to back off. But Warren, he began yelling at Jamal, asking, "You gonna shoot me?" While also saying that Jamal wasn't gonna do anything. Warren then took a couple steps towards Jamal, and then he fired the gun. Jamal then runs away. Saying he didn't intend to kill Warren, he intended to get Warren to back off so he could run away safely. Jamal went back and forth with the detectives, the prosecutor, and the judge. But still in the end, due to the witness statements, ballistic evidence, and several taped interviews with Jamal, the trial court sentenced Jamal to a term of 15 years to life for murder, plus an additional 25 years to life for the firearm use. Man, definitely rest in peace to Warren. While it's alleged he was a gang member too, he was still definitely at the wrong place at the wrong time when he ran into Tree Top Pirus member Jamal. But that's just one situation. When it comes to their enemies, they have a long list of crazy stories attached to this gang. including intense rivalry that has been going on for over a decade at this point. On top of that, what's definitely a theme throughout this video at this point is the deadly year it was for Compton in 2006. But more than a few stories coming out from this year and having the treetop stories attached to them. Like on the morning of June 10th of 2006, Deshaun Williams, Ozzie Davis, and Devion Harvey went to a gas station to buy cigars. And while at the gas station, they saw Fells in a car across the street from the driveway, which wouldn't have been an issue, but Leslie, Davis, and Harvey were all members of the Tree Top Pirus. And Fells was a member of the rival gang, the Fruittown Pirus. But Fells, he was in the car driving away, but they didn't think too much of it. After that, Leslie, Davis, and Harvey began walking down the street, which was in the territory of the Tree Top Pirus. But soon after that, Fells, he approaches from behind, points a pistol at the man, and fires 15 rounds at him. Unfortunately, Davis was killed, and Leslie was seriously wounded by the gunfire. But Harvey escaped injury by ducking behind a car. And while ducking, Harvey, who was armed with a revolver, pulled out his gun and fired at Fells, as Fells ran away from the scene. Initially, Leslie refused to cooperate with the police, fearing gang retaliation. A few days after the shooting, however, Leslie identified Fells as the assailant and the person who shot Davis. Leslie known Fells for many years when their respective gangs were friendly, also telling police that he and Harvey had been involved in another gang shooting approximately 1 month after the charged offenses, and that Harvey had been shot and killed in yet another gang-related shooting shortly thereafter. With that being said, Leslie put pressure on himself and his gang, the Fruittown Pirus, with his statements and cooperation with the police. So we had a lot of threats placed on them by the time the trial started. For example, 1 week prior to the November 8, 2006 preliminary hearing, Leslie received several telephone calls threatening to kill him and his family if he snitched on Fells. Also on the day of the hearing, Fells placed 2 phone calls to leaders of both the Tree Top Pirus and the Fruittown Pirus, during which they discussed unsuccessful attempts to convince Leslie not to testify, and later condemning Leslie for his testimony that Fells was the shooter. So by the time trial started, Leslie invoked his 5th Amendment right to remain silent, but his preliminary hearing testimony was read into the record. In addition, a gang expert testified that Fells was a member of the Piru gang and discussed the extensive criminal activities of members of that gang, which included murder, drive-by shootings, and armed robbery. The expert testified that the Fruittown and Treetops, to which Leslie, Davis, and Harvey belonged, were rivals. He also testified that gang members retaliated against rival gangs through violence, but never by snitching to police or testifying in court against a member of a rival gang, saying a gang member who snitches to the police about another gang member, even if it's a member of a rival gang, is in danger of being killed. And due to that evidence, Fells was convicted of the murder of Ozzie Davis, the premeditated attempted murder of Deshaun Leslie, and the trial court sentenced Fells to a total of 90 years to life. This sadly was just one storyline that played out that year that resulted in the murder. The Tree Top Pirus have been engaged in deadly warfare with the Fruittown Pirus, and through that have caused a lot of chaos in Compton. But to fully address why this war started, and to get into some more crazy stories, we have to address who this gang's main rivals are. Rivals of the Tree Top Pirus. Compton, or in this case Compton, is a little city with a lot of gangs, especially the Compton Crips, Pirus, and the Serenios that surround the area. The Compton area has always been known as a dangerous city when it comes to its gangs and wars they engage in with each other. And the Tree Top Pirus are a big example of this. Because of these facts, they have a lot of rivals. But first off, let's get into a couple allies. The allies to the Westside Pirus, the Campanella Park Pirus, and a couple other Piru gangs. But that's pretty much it. Some of their main rivals include the Cantavario Tortilla Flat. And these guys have a crazy history of going back and forth. For example, on April 16th of 2009, 3 teenage African-American males with ties to the Tree Top Pirus were traveling on foot when they were confronted by a carload of high-ranking members of the Cantavario Tortilla Flat. Multiple shots rang out near the intersection of Acacia and Elm Street, but when police arrived at the scene, there was no signs of any Piru member. Instead, they found a member of the T-Flats. The driver of the car slumped over in the steering wheel with a bullet wound to the head. And down the line to the witnesses and statements, a Tree Top Piru member was charged for the killing and sentenced to 21 years to life in prison. But that's just one rivalry. The Tree Top Pirus have a long-standing rivalry with the 145 neighborhood Piru, and a history of going to war with the Segundo, another Mexican gang located near the Treetop. They're also known a few with the Cantavario 7-0s, the Comptonvario 155, and a lot of Compton Crips, especially the Piru Blood Compton Crips. The crazy part about their rivals though, is that as you guys already know, the Treetops have a long-standing history of beefing with other Piru members. But the main gang they beef with, that falls under the same umbrella as these guys, is definitely gonna be with the Fruittown Pirus. Beef with the Fruittown Pirus. The Pirus are by far one of the tightest umbrellas when it comes to gangs and street politics. At the early point in gangs history in Los Angeles, the Pirus, they had to be close and have each other's back, just because they were always outnumbered by the Crips, who often had odds of around 6 Crips to 1 Blood when it came to average membership. And when it comes to the case of the Tree Top Pirus and the Fruittown Pirus, they start off being closer than most Piru gangs, mostly because of geographics and demographics in the area. The two gangs' territory is literally right across the street from each other, so they were often seen with each other. And rather at each other's corners, a party, or a park, you see them looking out for each other. But this relationship started to go south as we entered the 20th century. A Reddit user commented, "I think the death row days with members from the Mob Pirus, Looters Park Pirus, and the Tree Top Pirus helped shape the conflict you've seen in the last 2 decades. So this means this war will trace back to the 1990s. But in 1993, the song Piru Love by the Crips and the Bloods, a rapper spits, "Tree tops to the left, Fruittown to the right."
On Rosecrans Pass, only in the light. Tree toppers to the left, Fruittown is on the right.
So they definitely had close ties back then. With that being said, OG Mark gave his take on how this war started. Regardless of how it started, this rivalry has seen a lot of bodies being dropped on each side and caused a lot of violence in the city. For example, on May 27, 2006, Jackson, a member of the Tree Top Pirus, was living on Hickory Street in Compton, California, in a household that included his mother and his sister, Erica Connor. And then around 9 a.m., Jackson left the house to walk to a liquor store located around the block on Rosecrans. When he went inside the liquor store, he saw Carrie, whom he knew as Booty. Jackson had seen Carrie around the neighborhood many times and was aware that Carrie was a member of the Fruittown Pirus, a rival gang of the Treetops, whose territory was on the other side of Rosecrans. Once the two made eye contact, Carrie said to Jackson, "What's that Fruittown like?" Jackson interpreted this as Carrie's way of letting Jackson know that he was a member of the Fruittowns and as an implicit threat or challenge. So Jackson replied, "Well, so what?" as Carrie left the store. Jackson then made his purchases and began walking home, west on Rosecrans Avenue. And as Jackson turned on Hickory Street, he saw a burgundy 4-door car just south of Rosecrans. Inside the vehicle was Michael J. Flores and James Douglas Cox, whom Jackson knew as Cheeks. Flores was in the driver's seat, Cox was sitting next to him, and Carrie was in the back seat. Jackson knew Flores and Cox well, having seen them hundreds of times around the neighborhood. Jackson also had seen Flores driving the burgundy car on more than one occasion in the past. Jackson believed that both Flores and Cox were members of the Fruittown. In addition, Cox had on a prior occasion confronted Jackson outside the liquor store and told Jackson to tell his brother Jimmy that Cox was going to smoke his ass. Jackson also recalled multiple occasions where Cox yelled, "Fuck Tank Top," while passing Jackson on the street, which is a derogatory term for the Tree Top Pirus. When Jackson saw the burgundy car with Flores on the inside, he froze. And during that time, he seen Cox get out of the car, pull the hood of his sweatshirt over his head, and reach into his waistband. So Jackson, he turned and ran. And as he did that, he heard multiple gunshots and heard Cox say, "Fuck Tank Top." Jackson, who had been shot in the hip and the buttocks, ducked into a nearby barbershop and hid, followed by him asking a woman to call 911. After that, he was hospitalized for 4 days after the attack. And at the time of the trial, there were screws in his hips and he had difficulty walking. When Jackson's sister Erica found out about the shooting, Jackson told her that he had been shot by the Fruit Loops, which is a derogatory term for the Fruittown Pirus. However, when deputies questioned him, Jackson said that he had been shot by some Mexicans belonging to the T-Flap. But Jackson said that he gave deputies misinformation because he didn't want to be labeled as a snitch, which would put him and his family's life in jeopardy. But approximately 1 month after that incident, Jackson was arrested for possession of an assault rifle, interviewed by detectives. And during that interview, Jackson told them that Cox had shot him and also told them of Flores and Corey's involvement. With him giving this information without the detectives offering any type of deal or leniency on the case he was facing. And ultimately, Flores, along with Cox, were sentenced to life in prison. Thankfully, no one in that situation got killed, but trust, sadly, it's been more than a lot of bloodshed between these two gangs over the years, with multiple bodies being dropped on both sides. But the Tree Top Pirus are known to go to war with a lot of other different gangs in Compton too. And they've had more than a few members who have made their reputation so deadly. Prominent figures. The Tree Top Pirus have been around for over 4 decades, so they have more than a few prominent figures who have made this gang one of the most respected in Compton. But first off, I found a long list of members who are no longer with us. A few of them include Ozzie Davis, also known as CALI'S, who we already mentioned was shot and killed at 409 Spruce Street in Compton, California. It's also Davion Harvey, who was shot and killed near 111th Place in Watts in 2006. In addition is Ronnie Baylor, Big Bobo, Lil Bobo, D-Boy, OG Devil, O-Dog, Lil Teaspoon, Top Dog, OG Big Wolf, Lil Yank, and Tavon Sims. Plus it's Vincent Cohen Jr., also known as rapper Slim 400. Slim 400, a life rooted in the streets and lost to the same. Slim 400, born Vincent Cohen, was raised in the city of Compton, California, a place known for both its rich hip-hop legacy and its deeply entrenched gang culture. Growing up in an environment where music and street life often intertwined, Slim 400 found himself navigating a world where survival meant being solid, standing firm, and never folding. From a young age, he was exposed to realities from the block. And while he had talent, heart, and ambition, he also carried the world of his surroundings with him. As a member of the Tree Top Pirus, Slim 400 was more than just affiliated. He lived and breathed the code. He represented his hood proudly, not just in how he moved, but also in his music. He rapped about the life he lived, the struggles he saw, and the losses he took. His connection to the treetop, it wasn't just for show. It was deeply rooted, passed down through relationships and life experiences that molded who he was as a man and as an artist. Slim's music career, it took off at around the mid-2010s when he started working closely with YG, another Compton native and Piru affiliate. With Slim most notably known for his features on YG's songs such as Word is Bond and Twist My Fingers. In their chemistry, it was real, not just industry made, but built off mutual respect and shared experiences. When it came to rapping, Slim stood out with his gritty delivery and street-smart storytelling, making music that resonated with those who knew the life firsthand. He never tried to fake it or commercialize the struggle. He stayed true to the streets, even when it might have cost him bigger opportunities and sadly his life. On December 8th of 2021, he was in the yard of his house near Manchester Boulevard, near 7th Avenue, when he was approached by my Uncle Terry and shot several times. Surveillance showed that Slim tried to put up a fight, struggling to take Terry's gun after initially being shot. But through that struggle, he was shot several more times before the suspect ran away from the scene. Officers were close and heard the gunshots, and when they arrived, they found 400 on the ground, shot and wounded. He was taken to the hospital, but sadly he was pronounced dead from his wounds. Ultimately, Tory was sentenced to 32 years to life in prison. Definitely rest in peace to Slim 400. The sad part is that Slim's death was a cold and sudden end to a life that had already survived numerous close calls, including previous 2019 shooting where he was hit 9 times but by a miracle pulled through. That year, he spoke to Nick Cannon about surviving the shooting. He told Nick Cannon that he still had staples in his stomach from some of the wounds, and that he had been shot in the ear, back, shoulder, and the jaw. The rapper was hospitalized for 15 days and said he spoke to God during that time, telling him, "I'm gonna do right, God." Also saying, "I ain't gonna be in the streets no more. Just give me another chance and let me show you I can do better." And after that shooting, he was publicly seen trying to change his street habits and convert to more of a rapper. So his murder, it sent shockwaves to the hip-hop and the street community. Seen as yet a reminder of how fast life can be taken from you in the same streets that raised you. Slim's death, it wasn't just the loss of a rapper. It was the loss of someone who truly represented the side of Compton many don't understand. He was a product of his environment, but also a reflection of his strength, resilience, and pain. His loyalty to his set, his community, and his music was unwavering. And even in death, his legacy lives through the tracks he left behind and the rumors who still speak his name. Definitely rest in peace to them. And y'all let me know in the comments if any of the members who are no longer with us. Let their names live on. In addition, they also have a lot of OGs who put in a lot of work for the Tree Top Pirus. A few of them include Ayatollah Mar, who was a triple OG who put in a lot of work for the Treetops and the Pirus as an umbrella. These days, you can see him doing occasional interviews and helping out in the community he was raised in through several charities. It's also Junior, Remus, Kitaru, and Ricky. On top of that, they also have a few rappers who have put in a lot of work for Compton and beyond over the years. The earliest rappers of this gang comes to the 1993 song Piru Blood by the Crips and the Bloods, where Tree Top Pirus is mentioned in the line, Treetop to the left and Fruitown to the right. But also in his 1994 song, Dollars Plus Cents by DJ Quick, where he referenced the gang where he says Westside trees spraying out the fleas. And he's definitely a prominent figure from this gang, dropping numerous classic albums and songs over the years and still being looked up to by a lot of rappers to this day. One of my favorite songs from him is definitely gonna be Tonight. Y'all let me know in the comments your favorite DJ Quick song though. Another artist is gonna be High C, who first came into the industry after he put out his Scandalous album in 1990. He recently released the album called Open, so y'all tap in ASAP if y'all haven't heard of him yet. A few other rappers include YTM Island Boy and YTM Yogi. I actually just found them while looking for B-roll for this video, and I'm definitely impressed. And both are pretty good. Island Boy has a funny yet gangster flow, kind of reminds me of a Blood Draco Ruler. Yogi has a cool flow too, very gassed up, and also catchy lyrics. Now make sure y'all tap in ASAP. But another artist who definitely helped keep the West Coast relevant over the years is definitely gonna be YG. In 2008, the Tree Top Pirus' stake in hip-hop culture was reinforced with the rise of rapper YG, who made an impact with the release of Tooted and Booted, featuring another prominent Blood artist named Ty Dolla $ign. Yeah, and don't get it fucked up. YG had been putting in a lot of work in the music scene since before 2008, when the jerking era was in full form. Yeah, songs like Just Broke Up, Amy, She a Model. Y'all remember this? Yeah, Tooted and Booted was definitely a breakout song, but YG has a long list of great songs before that. Y'all let me know in the comments your favorite song from YG's early days. Another big rapper from this game is gonna be DJ Quick. Born David Marvin Blake on January 18, 1970 in Compton, California, DJ Quick emerged from humble beginnings, marked by the grit and vibrancy of his surroundings. Compton, a city synonymous with the rise of gangster rap, served as both the backdrop and the muse for Quick's artistic expression. Other rappers from this gang are going to be Key to Rue. Y'all let me know in the comments if any of the rappers I missed. Let's get their music heard. Current state of the Tree Top Pirus. When it comes to the current state of the Tree Top Pirus, today's stand is one of the more active gangs in Compton. This gang started off in the 1970s as one of the more active gangs in Compton. And in the 1980s and 90s, they managed to thrive to the point where they can be found in other states as well. The Tree Top Pirus were spread to other parts of the United States, including Tennessee, Texas, and Maryland. Matter of fact, in 2007, a high-ranking female member of the Tree Top Pirus in Baltimore named Michelle Hilborn killed David Leonard Moore, who Hilborn believed to be a rival gang member. After killing Moore, Hilborn wrote a poem which was used as evidence in her trial. I guess just shot a nigga in the head cause he wear a blue hat but claimed red. Plus I wanted the satisfaction of seeing a nigga dead. Hilborn eventually was sentenced to 30 years in prison for the murder and racketeering. In addition, the Treetops have made headlines in Texas as well. Like in January 2007, a Tree Top Pirus member in Houston named Javon Williams shot and killed Charlie Bennett Jr. after an argument. Williams also committed a second murder in February of 2017 when he killed the victim and ransacked their apartment. And in the end, he was sentenced to life for the two murders. Lastly, they also have a presence in New York, but y'all let me know in the comments if they have a presence in any other states. Anyways, that's it for the Tree Tops though. Y'all got any crazy stories about these guys? Any close calls? Also, did I miss anything? Did I get anything wrong? Y'all let me know in the comments. Let's have a conversation about it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you liked the video or if you're a part of the Danger Gang. Y'all stay safe for dangers out there.